The galaxy was vast, but fear had a way of shrinking it. For decades, humanity had clawed its way through the stars, building colonies on barren moons and terraforming dead planets into thriving homes. But now all that progress felt fragile. The Valeth were coming. Jamin tightened his grip on the rifle as he crouched behind a jagged rock formation. His breath fogged up the visor of his helmet, but he didn't dare wipe it away. Not here. Not now. Around him, explosions lit up the darkened sky like fireworks gone wrong. Shards of metal rained down from destroyed ships, glinting faintly in the dim light of the distant sun. "Hold your positions!" shouted Captain Yu over the comms. His voice cracked with static but carried enough authority to steady nerves. Jamin glanced at the others in his squad. There were only 5 left, including him. 5 out of 20. The rest had been wiped out in less than an hour when the Valeth ambush hit. Their enemy moved like shadows, silent, precise, and utterly merciless. Every shot they fired seemed to find its mark. Every step they took brought death closer. But Jamin wasn't thinking about dying. He was thinking about surviving. A flash of movement caught his eye. A sleek, black-armored figure darting between rocks. It was one of them, a Valeth soldier. Jamin adjusted his aim, steadying his breathing. His finger hovered over the trigger. "Wait," whispered Yun-Su, who knelt beside him. Her voice was barely audible, even though her helmet was just inches away. She pointed toward another ridge, where 2 more figures appeared. "They're trying to flank us." Jamin nodded. He signaled to the others using hand gestures, a silent language drilled into every soldier during training. One by one, they acknowledged the plan. Then chaos erupted. Jamin sprang into action, firing short bursts to draw attention, while Yun-Su slipped around the side. The Valeth turned their weapons toward him, plasma bolts scorching the ground near his feet. He ducked behind cover, heart pounding. "Come on," he muttered under his breath. Yun-Su struck first, throwing a grenade that sent one of the Valeth flying backward. Before the others could react, Jamin charged forward, abandoning caution for speed. He leaped over a fallen boulder, landing hard but rolling to absorb the impact. Up close, the Valeth looked monstrous. Tall, insect-like creatures with glowing red eyes and razor-sharp claws. One lunged at him, while its blade slicing through the air. Jamin sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the strike. He swung his rifle like a club, smashing it into the creature's armored chest. The blow didn't penetrate, but it stunned the alien long enough for Jamin to pull out his combat knife. With a swift motion, he drove the blade into the joint of its exoskeleton, where the armor was weakest. The Valeth let out a guttural scream before collapsing. Breathing heavily, Jamin scanned the area. 2 down, 1 left. Where was it? Suddenly, pain exploded across his back. He stumbled forward, nearly dropping his weapon. Turning quickly, he saw the 3rd Valeth standing there, its blade dripping with blood. Not his own, but likely from someone else in the squad. Anger surged through Jamin. He roared and charged, ignoring the protests of his body. When the Valeth raised its weapon again, aiming for a killing blow, but Jamin was faster. Using the momentum of his charge, he slammed his shoulder into the alien's midsection, knocking it off balance. They both crashed to the ground, grappling fiercely. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Jamin wrestled with the Valeth, straining against its unnatural strength. Its claws scraped against his armor, leaving deep gouges. Then, with a final burst of effort, he managed to pin the creature down. Grabbing his knife once more, he plunged it into the Valeth's throat. It twitched violently before going still. Jamin collapsed onto his back, gasping for air. His vision blurred, but he forced himself to sit up. Nearby, Yun-Su and the remaining members of the squad regrouped, checking each other for injuries. "We need to move," Yun-Su said urgently. "More will come." Nodding weakly, Jamin got to his feet. His body screamed in protest, but adrenaline kept him moving. As they retreated, he couldn't shake the image of those red eyes staring back at him. Back at the command center, news of the skirmish spread quickly. Hijin, a strategist known for her sharp mind and unorthodox tactics, reviewed the footage of the battle. When she saw Jamin take down 3 Valeth soldiers almost single-handedly, her interest piqued. "He's different," she murmured to herself, rewinding the video to watch it again. "There's something unusual about him." Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the Valeth Council convened in their grand chamber. Holographic projections displayed images of recent battles, highlighting humanity's stubborn resistance. "So what, they adapt too quickly," one council member hissed. "Our strategies are rendered obsolete within hours." Another leaned forward, its voice cold and calculating. "Then we must deploy our ultimate solution. Send Kalen." Kalen. The name alone carried weight. Legends spoke of him as the perfect killer, a being engineered for destruction. No emotion, no hesitation, just pure efficiency. As preparations began, Kalen stood silently in his quarters, sharpening his blade. He knew what awaited him. Humanity would fall, just like every other species that dared oppose the Valith. Yet somewhere deep inside, a flicker of doubt stirred. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it lingered nonetheless. Little did anyone know, this mission would change everything, for both sides. Kalen moved like a shadow, silent and deadly. His arrival on the battlefield was marked not by fanfare or announcements, but by the sudden, overwhelming silence that followed in his wake. Entire fleets fell apart as he cut through their ranks with surgical precision. Colonies that had stood for decades were reduced to rubble within hours. The Valith's ultimate weapon had been unleashed, and humanity trembled under its weight. Jamin heard the stories before he saw Kalen himself. Whispers spread among the soldiers, tales of an unstoppable assassin who left no survivors. Some claimed he wasn't even alive, that he was some kind of machine built solely to kill. Others said he was a demon sent to punish humanity for daring to challenge the Valith. But Jamin didn't believe in legends. He believed in what he could see, touch, and fight, and soon enough, he would get his chance. And it happened during a raid on a Valith supply depot deep behind enemy lines. Jamin's squad had been tasked with destroying a critical shipment of weapons bound for the front. The mission was risky, but Hijin insisted it was necessary. "We need to disrupt their operations," she had said. "Every second we buy gives us more time to prepare." The depot was heavily guarded, but Jamin and his team managed to infiltrate it without raising alarms. They moved quickly, planting explosives at key points. Just as they finished setting the charges, however, something changed. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. It wasn't the sound of engines or machinery. It was something else entirely, something unnatural. "Do you hear that?" Yunsu whispered, her voice tense. Jamin nodded, and he motioned for the others to stay close as they crept toward the source of the noise. What they found stopped them in their tracks. Standing in the center of the depot was Kalen. He wore black armor that seemed to absorb light, making him almost invisible against the darkness. In one hand, he held a long, curved blade that gleamed faintly despite the lack of illumination. His face was obscured by a helmet, but his presence alone was enough to send chills down Jamin's spine. For a moment, no one moved. Then Kalen turned his head slightly, as if sensing their presence. Without warning, he lunged forward, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. "Scatter!" Jamin shouted, diving to the side just as Kalen's blades sliced through the air where he had been standing. The squad split up, it firing wildly in an attempt to slow him down. But nothing worked. Bullets ricocheted off his armor harmlessly, and plasma bolts dissipated before they could reach him. It was like fighting a ghost. Jamin rolled to his feet and drew his combat knife. He knew running wouldn't help, not against someone like this. If they wanted to survive, they needed to stand their ground. Kalen approached him slowly, deliberately. There was no rush in his movements, no sign of urgency. He was confident, almost arrogant in his superiority. When he swung his blade again, Jamin reacted instinctively. He raised his arm to block the attack, fully expecting the sharp edge to slice through his flesh. But it didn't. Instead, Jamin caught the blade mid-swing, gripping it tightly with both hands. For a moment, everything froze. Even Kalen seemed stunned, his glowing red eyes widening slightly behind his visor. "What?" he muttered, his voice low and gravelly. Jamin didn't answer. He twisted the blade sharply, forcing Kalen to release it. Then with a roar, he drove his knife into the joint of Kalen's armor, just as he had done with the Valith soldier days earlier. This time, though, it wasn't enough. Kalen recovered quickly, grabbing Jamin by the throat and lifting him off the ground. "You're strong," Kalen admitted, his tone almost curious. Stronger than any human I've faced before? Jamin struggled to breathe, clawing at the hand around his neck, but he refused to give up. Summoning every ounce of strength he had left, he kicked Kalen hard in the chest, forcing him to stagger backward. The two fighters circled each other warily, neither willing to make the first move. Around them, the depot burned, explosions lighting up the night sky. Finally, Kalen spoke again. "You intrigue me, human. Perhaps there is more to your species than I was led to believe." With that, he turned and disappeared into the flames, leaving Jamin and his squad shaken but alive. Back at command headquarters, Heejin reviewed the footage of the encounter. Her eyes widened as she watched Jamin catch Kalen's blade. It was impossible, or at least it should have been. No ordinary human could react that quickly. "He's special," she murmured to herself. "There's something unique about him." She began analyzing data from previous battles, searching for patterns in Jamin's behavior. What she discovered was astonishing. His reflexes were faster than anyone else's, his decision-making sharper. It was as if his brain processed information differently, allowing him to anticipate danger before it arrived. Heejin realized this wasn't just luck or skill, it was something innate, something that could be enhanced. "We can train him," she told Captain Yu. "Push him beyond his limits. If we do it right, he might be able to take Kalen down." Captain Yu frowned. "And if we fail, we'll lose our best soldier, and possibly the war." "It's a risk we have to take," Heejin replied firmly. "If we don't try, we've already lost." Meanwhile, Kalen returned to the Valeth Council, his mind troubled. For the first time in his existence, he felt doubt creeping in. Humans weren't supposed to be capable of such feats. They were fragile, insignificant creatures compared to the Valeth. Yet Jamin had proven otherwise. As he stood before the council, Kalen hesitated. Normally, he would report his success and move on to the next target. But this time, he couldn't shake the memory of Jamin's defiance, the way he had stared death in the face and refused to back down. "The human is different," Kalen said finally. "He poses a greater threat than anticipated." The council members exchanged uneasy glances. One of them leaned forward, its voice dripping with suspicion. "Are you questioning your ability to eliminate him?" "No," Kalen replied. "I am questioning whether elimination is still the correct course of action." Silence fell over the chamber. Never before had Kalen expressed anything resembling hesitation. To the council, he was a tool, a weapon to be wielded without thought or remorse. The idea that he might possess free will was unsettling, to say the least. "We explain yourself," another council member demanded. Kalen paused, choosing his words carefully. "Humans are resilient. They adapt. They learn. Perhaps there is value in understanding them rather than simply eradicating them." The council erupted into heated debate, but Kalen tuned them out. For the first time, he allowed himself to wonder, was he truly the perfect killer, or was he something else entirely? Little did he know his doubts would soon lead him down a path he never expected, one that would bring him face to face with Jamin once more. Jamin stood in a dimly lit training room, sweat dripping down his face as he stared at the holographic projection of Kalen before him. The simulation was designed to mimic their earlier encounter, but this time Heejin had added variables, unexpected movements, environmental changes, even psychological triggers meant to test Jamin's limits. "Focus," Heejin said from the observation deck above. Her voice echoed through the speakers, calm but firm. "You can't afford to hesitate." Jamin nodded, though she couldn't see it. He tightened his grip on the practice sword, a weighted replica of Kalen's blade, and took a deep breath. The simulation began again. Holographic Kalen moved with terrifying speed, lunging forward in an attack that would have ended the fight instantly if it were real. But Jamin was ready. His body reacted almost instinctively, dodging to the side while countering with a swift strike aimed at Kalen's exposed flank. The hologram flickered briefly, registering the hit, then resumed its relentless assault. This time, it feinted left before spinning around for a devastating backhand slash. Jamin barely managed to block it, the force of the blow sending shockwaves through his arms. "You're improving," Heejin noted, her tone approving but cautious. "But you need to push harder, faster, stronger." Jamin gritted his teeth and redoubled his efforts. Over the past few days, he had undergone intense physical conditioning and mental exercises designed to enhance his reflexes and decision-making abilities. Every session left him exhausted, but also more confident. He could feel himself changing, not just physically, but mentally too. After hours of grueling practice, Jaimin finally collapsed onto the floor, chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. Heejin descended from the observation deck and knelt beside him, offering a small canteen of water. "You're doing well," she said softly. "Better than I expected." Jamin accepted the water gratefully, taking a long sip before responding. "Am I ready?" Heejin hesitated. "Ready enough to survive, but surviving isn't enough anymore. We need to win." He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Winning meant more than just defeating Kalen. It meant turning the tide of the entire war, and that responsibility rested squarely on his shoulders. Elsewhere, Kalen wandered through the desolate corridors of a Valith battleship, lost in thought. Since his encounter with Jamin, he found himself questioning everything he had been taught. Humans weren't supposed to be capable of such feats. They were fragile, fleeting beings compared to the Valith. Yet Jamin had proven otherwise. As he walked, memories surfaced unbidden. Flashes of his creation, the endless conditioning, the countless lives he had taken without remorse. For the first time, those memories felt heavy, like chains binding him to a purpose he no longer fully believed in. Kalen stopped in front of a viewport, gazing out at the stars streaking by. Somewhere out there, Jamin waited. And Kalen knew their paths would cross again soon. When the day came, it was on a barren asteroid used as a staging ground for Valith forces. Humanity had launched a daring counteroffensive, aiming to cripple the enemy's supply lines. Jamin led a small team tasked with disabling a critical energy core powering the asteroid's defenses. The mission started smoothly enough. The team infiltrated the facility undetected, planting explosives at key points. But as they prepared to retreat, alarms blared throughout the complex. "They know we're here!" Yunsu shouted, firing at approaching Valith soldiers. Jamin cursed under his breath. "Fall back! Stick to the plan!" They fought their way through wave after wave of enemies, but reinforcements kept coming. Just when it seemed they might be overwhelmed, a familiar figure appeared at the end of the corridor. Kalen. This time there was no hesitation, no testing of boundaries or probing for weaknesses. Kalen charged forward with lethal intent, his blades slicing through the air with deadly precision. Jamin met him head-on, their weapons clashing with a deafening clang. Sparks flew as metal scraped against metal, each strike reverberating through the narrow hallway. Around them, chaos reigned. Explosions rocked the facility as the planted charges detonated one by one. Debris rained down from the ceiling, forcing both fighters to dodge and weave between falling rubble. Despite the chaos, Jamin remained focused. He remembered every lesson Heejin had drilled into him, every strategy he had practiced in the simulations. When Kalen feinted left, Jamin countered right. When Kalen aimed for his legs, Jamin jumped back, creating distance. For a moment, it seemed like they were evenly matched. But Kalen's strength and speed were unmatched, and Jamin began to tire. A misstep cost him dearly. A sharp kick to the stomach sent him sprawling backward. Kalen loomed over him, raising his blade for the killing blow. But instead of striking, he paused. His glowing red eyes narrowed as he studied Jamin's face. "Why do you fight?" Kalen asked, his voice low and gravelly. Jamin blinked, surprised by the question. Then slowly he pushed himself up onto his elbows. "Because I have something worth fighting for." Kalen tilted his head slightly as if considering the answer. Around them, the facility groaned under the strain of collapsing structures. Time was running out. Finally, Kalen lowered his blade. "Then prove it," he said simply. Before Jamin could respond, Kalen turned and disappeared into the smoke-filled corridor, leaving him stunned but alive. Back at command headquarters, Heejin reviewed the latest footage of the battle. When she saw Kalen spare Jamin's life, her eyes widened in disbelief. "He's wavering," she murmured to herself. "There's a crack in his armor." She realized this wasn't just about defeating Kalen anymore. It was about reaching him, showing him that there was another way. That humanity wasn't just a species to be eradicated, but one worth understanding. and Yaman was the key to making that happen. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath as Jamin and Kalen prepared for their final confrontation. Word of their earlier encounters had spread among both humans and Valeth, turning them into legends on opposite sides of the war. For humanity, Yaman symbolized hope, a reminder that even against impossible odds, resilience could prevail. For the Valeth, Kalen represented perfection, an unstoppable force designed to crush all resistance. But now perfection was faltering. Kalen stood alone on a crumbling space station orbiting a dying star. The structure groaned under the strain of constant bombardment from both sides, its walls cracked and its systems failing. It was here that Heejin had chosen to stage the climactic battle, knowing it would force Kalen to face Jaimin without distractions. Jaimin arrived with Yunsu and a small team. Their mission clear: disable the station's core reactor, which powered the Valeth fleet's shields. If they succeeded, humanity would gain a decisive advantage in the war. But first, they had to deal with Kalen. As they moved through the station, the air grew thick with tension. Every step echoed loudly in the narrow corridors, and every shadow seemed to hide an enemy. When they finally reached the central chamber, Kalen was waiting. He stood motionless in the center of the room, his blade resting casually at his side. His glowing red eyes locked onto Jamin the moment he entered. "You came," Kalen said, his voice calm but tinged with something unfamiliar: uncertainty. "I didn't have much of a choice," Jamin replied, gripping his weapon tightly. For a moment, neither moved. Then, with startling speed, Kalen lunged forward, his blade slicing through the air. Jamin barely managed to block the attack, stumbling backward under the sheer force of the blow. The battle that followed was unlike anything either of them had experienced before. Kalen fought with precision and power, each strike calculated to end the fight quickly. But Jamin countered with raw determination and adaptability, using every trick he had learned during training. They clashed again and again, their weapons sparking as they exchanged blows. Around them, the station continued to deteriorate. Panels sparked and fell from the ceiling, and the floor trembled beneath their feet. Yet neither fighter paid any attention to their surroundings. Their focus was entirely on each other. As the fight dragged on, flashbacks began to surface in both their minds. For Jamin, memories of his childhood flooded back, growing up in poverty, fighting tooth and nail for every scrap of food or opportunity. He remembered the sacrifices his family had made to send him to school, the nights spent studying by candlelight because they couldn't afford electricity. These memories fueled his resolve, reminding him why he fought, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever struggled against impossible odds. For Kalen, the memories were darker. He saw flashes of his creation, the cold laboratories where he had been engineered, and the endless conditioning that stripped away any trace of emotion or individuality. He remembered the countless lives he had taken, not out of hatred or malice, but simply because it was what he had been programmed to do. These thoughts weighed heavily on him, sowing seeds of doubt in his mind. Was this truly his purpose? To kill without question or remorse? The turning point came when Yaman managed to disarm Kylan, knocking his blade across the room. Instead of pressing the attack, however, Jamin hesitated. "It doesn't have to be like this," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "You don't have to keep killing." Kalen stared at him, his expression unreadable behind the helmet. For a long moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of distant explosions. Then slowly, Kalen lowered his guard. "I don't know how to stop," he admitted, his voice quieter than usual. Jamin took a cautious step forward, lowering his own weapon. "You start by choosing, by deciding what kind of future you want to see." Kalen's fists clenched at his sides, trembling slightly. It was a gesture so human that it startled Jamin. For all his strength and skill, Kalen wasn't invincible. Beneath the armor and programming, there was still a being capable of doubt, and perhaps redemption. Before either of them could say more, the ground shook violently as another explosion rocked the station. Pieces of the ceiling collapsed, forcing them to dive apart to avoid being crushed. "We need to finish this," Jamin shouted over the noise. "Help us disable the reactor, and we can end this war together." Kalen hesitated, then nodded. Together, and they joined forces to complete the mission, working quickly to bypass security systems and plant explosives near the core. Along the way, they encountered waves of Valeth soldiers, but with Kalen fighting alongside them, the resistance crumbled easily. When the last charge was set, Jamin turned to Kalen. "We need to go. Now." Kalen nodded again, but instead of following Jamin, he stayed behind. "What are you doing?" Jamin demanded, panic rising in his chest. "I'll stay to ensure the detonation sequence completes," Kalen replied. "It's the least I can do." "No, you don't have to sacrifice yourself." Kalen tilted his head slightly, almost smiling. "Perhaps not, but it's a choice I'm making freely for the first time." Before Jamin could argue further, Kalen activated the countdown timer and pushed him toward the exit. Reluctantly, Jamin obeyed, sprinting after Yunsu and the others as the station began to collapse around them. Behind him, Kalen stood alone in the central chamber, watching the numbers tick down. For once, he felt a sense of peace. Whatever happened next, he had chosen his path, and that made all the difference. The galaxy watched as humanity launched its final assault on the Valeth homeworld. It was a bold, desperate move, one that could either end the war or doom them all. At the forefront of this mission were Jamin, Yunsu, and an unexpected ally, Kalen. Though presumed dead after sacrificing himself to destroy the space station's core reactor, Kalen had survived. The explosion had left him battered and scarred, but alive. When he emerged from the wreckage, he found himself surrounded by human soldiers who had been sent to retrieve Jamin's team. Instead of attacking, Kalen surrendered, offering his assistance in exchange for a chance at redemption. Heejin was skeptical at first, but she recognized the value of having someone with Kalen's knowledge and skills on their side. "He knows their weaknesses," she told Captain Yu. "If we can trust him, he might be the key to winning this war." And so Kalen joined humanity's ranks, not as their enemy, but as an uneasy ally. Now aboard a massive assault cruiser heading straight for the heart of the Valeth Empire, Kalen stood alongside Jamin and Yunsu, staring out at the stars streaking past the viewport. "You don't have to do this," Jamin said quietly, breaking the silence. Kalen glanced at him, his glowing red eyes dimmer than usual. "Yes, I do. This is my choice now." Jamin nodded, respecting the decision. He didn't fully understand what drove Kalen, whether it was guilt, curiosity, or something else entirely, but he knew one thing for certain. Kalen had changed. When they arrived at the Valeth homeworld, the scene was chaos. Swarms of ships filled the sky, exchanging fire in a dazzling display of destruction. Explosions lit up the atmosphere, casting eerie shadows across the planet's surface. Jamin's team led the charge, breaching the outer defenses and landing on a sprawling battlefield littered with wreckage. From there, they fought their way toward the capital city, where the Valeth Council awaited. Every step was a struggle. The Valeth threw everything they had at the invaders: ground troops, aerial drones, and even towering mechs designed to crush entire armies. But humanity pressed forward relentlessly, driven by desperation and hope. Kalen proved invaluable during the fight. His familiarity with Valeth tactics allowed him to anticipate their moves, giving Jamin and the others precious seconds to react. More than once, he saved their lives by intercepting attacks meant for them, but the cost was high. By the time they reached the gates of the capital, nearly half of their forces had fallen. Among the casualties was Yunsu, who sacrificed herself to disable a critical defense system. Her death hit Jamin hard, but he forced himself to keep moving. There would be time to grieve later, if they survived. Inside the council chamber, the Valeth leaders gathered, their expressions a mix of fear and defiance. They had never imagined humanity would reach this far, let alone breach their inner sanctum. Jamin entered the room first, followed closely by Kalen. The sight of the former assassin standing alongside his enemies sent shockwaves through the council. "How dare you betray us?" one member hissed, pointing an accusatory claw at Kalen. "I didn't betray anyone," Kalen replied coldly. "You betrayed yourselves when you created me, without purpose beyond killing." The council erupted into arguments, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of anger and denial. But Jamin ignored them, stepping forward until he stood directly in front of the central dais. "This ends now," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Surrender or face annihilation." For a moment, no one spoke. Then slowly, And the council members began to lower their weapons. One by one, they bowed their heads in submission. It was over. In the days that followed, humanity worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been lost. Treaties were signed, alliances forged, and plans made to restore peace to the galaxy. Though scars remained, both physical and emotional, the future felt brighter than it had in years. Kalen played a crucial role in the rebuilding process. Freed from his programming, he dedicated himself to helping those affected by the war. Whether it was clearing debris from destroyed colonies or aiding refugees displaced by the conflict, he became a symbol of redemption, a reminder that even the most broken things could find purpose again. As for Jamin, he returned to Earth where he was hailed as a hero. Yet he refused to let fame define him. Instead, he focused on honoring the sacrifices made by those who had fought alongside him. He visited memorials, spoke at ceremonies, and worked to ensure that no one forgot the lessons learned during the war. One evening, as the sun set over a quiet park, Jamin found himself sitting beside Kalen. Neither spoke for a long time, content simply to watch the colors fade from the sky. "You've come a long way," Jamin said finally, breaking the silence. "So have you," Kalen replied. Jamin smiled faintly. "Guess we both still have a lot to learn." Kalen nodded, his expression unreadable but somehow softer than before. "Perhaps, but at least now, we choose our path." And with that, they sat together in companionable silence. Two beings from opposite sides of the galaxy united by shared experiences and newfound understanding. The galaxy was vast, but hope had a way of filling it. For the first time in years, humanity looked toward the stars not with fear, but with optimism.